All right, here we go. It's the Stone Shield Show. Welcome in here on a Wednesday. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us here this Wednesday morning. No off the bench here today. It is just me here at the show. So we got our show started here at 10 o'clock. Graphics, for whatever reason, not working right now. So, obviously I'm producing this and hosting it at the same time. So looks like we're going to be without graphics today, and that is okay. It's just me, and I'll walk you through exactly what we got going here on today's show. But plenty to discuss here on a Wednesday. Again, no off the bench. Reed Mouse, he is out throughout the rest of the week, so we were told to bump our show up to the 10 o'clock time slots, and then we will simply go from there. But Casey Mallister is going to be joining us here on today's show, and before that, we do have some Bengals trade rumors that I want to get to. ESPN released so their top 25 players that could be dealt at the deadline, and there are 3 Cincinnati Bengals in the mix. So we're going to be breaking down those names. Casey Mallister, as I mentioned, will join us at about 10:15, and after that, we'll talk some Billy Napier replacements here on today's show, and our college football top 10, and we do that obviously every single Wednesday. So I appreciate everybody for hanging out with us here, and I'll take a second here to try to figure out what is going on with these graphics. Not exactly sure. It doesn't look like the off the bench ones are working here right now. Mine not working. So, I guess we'll just fly without the graphics here today. Sorry about that for you guys watching live right now. It's just me on the screen with no graphics, but we'll have that figured out there by tomorrow. But as I mentioned, Bengals trade rumors, Casey Mallister, Billy Napier replacements, college football top 10. That's all coming up here on the show. So certainly looking forward to diving into that. Let's start with these trade rumors, right? As I mentioned, ESPN, they rank their top 25 players who could be on the move when the trade deadline comes, and that will be, of course, in a couple of weeks, right around the Bengals bye. November 4th is the trade deadline for the Cincinnati Bengals, and there's 3 players that they had listed in their top 25. And first, of course, is Trey Hendrickson. There's a lot of teams out there that certainly could use Trey Hendrickson. I think you can make the argument that Trey Hendrickson makes every single team better in the National Football League. But the Bengals probably aren't going to move Trey Hendrickson, right? I think they would have to go 0-2 over the course of the next 2 games in order to move him, right? And I just don't really see that happening with the Jets, of course, being on the docket this week, and then the Bears after that. Going into the Pittsburgh game, it's like if you kind of eliminate yourself here, if you go 1-2 going into the bye, of course 0-3 kind of eliminates you there as well, and then maybe you look to move Trey Hendrickson. Of course, I view this to be his final year in Cincinnati, right? I don't think he is going to continue to be a Cincinnati Bengal after this year. And if you could perhaps get a draft pick for Trey Hendrickson, I think there was some people that would be definitely interested in doing that. And I think that would be the right call. But at this point, your season has life, right? You beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. You're 3-4. The AFC as a conference is weak from top to bottom here at this point. And, I think that certainly gives you an opportunity to perhaps be sticking around later in the year. And, of course, you're going to want one of your best players if that is the case. So ESPN had him ranked at number 1. But, again, you got to lose these next 2 games for him to be on the move, because you're going to have some life as it relates to your season here at this point. With Trey Hendrickson, there's absolutely no reason to move off him here at this point. Obviously, the Eagles is a team that would be interested, right? Howie Roseman, their general manager, of course, is always trying to make some moves, adjust their roster, be a little bit better each and every week. I think the Eagles are still very much a threat. Lou Anarumo, a guy that we'll talk about a little bit here on the show with Indianapolis. You've got former Bengals going over there. Jermaine Pratt, certainly the latest to do it. Lou Anarumo has a great defense this year for the Indianapolis Colts, and they certainly could use another pass rusher in Trey Hendrickson. I think the popular team that's been floated around is certainly the San Francisco 49ers, all the injuries that they're dealing with, right? They lost Fred Warner here recently. Nick Bosa, they lost him a few weeks ago, and that's a team where Kyle Shanahan, he looks like the front runner for Coach of the Year, and they're seemingly finding ways to win games despite the fact that obviously Guys continue to get hurt, and they're still winning. It's next man up. At some point, it feels like that's going to run out, right? But Trey Hendrickson certainly would fit in well with that defense. But again, ESPN has him at number 1. The Bengals aren't going to make that type of move unless they lose these next 2 games. But these other 2 names that ESPN did list are very interesting. And that first name is Logan Wilson, and they have him at the 11 spots in the top 25 as it relates to players that could be moved at the deadline. The Bengals obviously are kind of, not fully moving off Logan Wilson, but they, seemingly have gone with Barrett Carter there at that linebacker spot, and Logan Wilson, a captain, not starting as much as he once was. And the Bengals, or ESPN has it listed as a 60% chance that the Bengals trade Logan Wilson. I think that's very interesting. The Bengals, as an organization, of course, not known to make many trades. They kind of broke that streak here this year with Joe Flacco, of course, being acquired in a trade. And then you had Khalil Herbert being acquired in a trade at the deadline last year for a 7th-round pick. Now, to be honest with you, I have no idea what you would get back in return for Logan Wilson. I assume it's just going to be a day 3 pick, right, and really nothing more than that. But I think Logan Wilson can still play in this league. And I think he's a guy that, with a more veteran defense could step up and make some things happen. Is he the same player he was early in his career? No, absolutely not. But this is a guy that, has a nose for the football, right? We've seen him, several PBUs, several interceptions there, of course, throughout his time as a Cincinnati Bengal. And perhaps you could move him for a later pick. This kind of would surprise me. ESPN, again, has it listed at 60%. That seems a little bit high. I think at some point the Bengals are going to want to have some experience in that linebacker room. I think there's value with Logan Wilson still being on this team, even if he is getting phased out a little bit more for Barrett Carter. And, of course, in the NFL, you always need depth. And, I don't think you're going to get a player back in return. It'd probably just be a day 3 pick. And, yeah, you might want to get that pick that you lost for Joe Flacco, but I think there's more value to keeping Logan Wilson. I was very surprised that ESPN had that at 60%. Some teams involved that they could believe would trade for Logan Wilson include the Dallas Cowboys, the San Francisco 49ers, the Buffalo Bills, and the Indianapolis Colts. All could use a linebacker, all could use a veteran. And, I don't think he's completely washed, right? Like, I still think he has some good football ahead of him. Might not be here in Cincinnati and maybe make a move in the offseason, but just getting rid of him for a day 3 pick when you have all that inexperience in the linebacker room, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. But that is interesting that he is on this list and all the way up at the 11th spot for ESPN as it relates to their top 25 guys that could potentially be moved at the deadline. And at the 20 spot, now this one I think there is a chance that it could happen, and that is Cam Taylor-Britt. ESPN lists that there is a 25% chance in their eyes that they move off of CTB, the Cincinnati Bengals, at the trade deadline. Teams in the mix include the Colts, the Commanders, and the Eagles. Look, Cam Taylor-Britt, I wouldn't say he was fully a bust because at the beginning of his career, he was very productive here in Cincinnati. But the past 2 years certainly have not lived up to the expectation that the Bengals had for him. And the expectation was that he would come in and be their cornerback 1 these past 2 years. He would face off against the best receiver on the other team. And he hasn't done a good job of that, obviously. And, he found ways to get benched last year, right? He was in and out of the lineup. When he was in, it wasn't very good. This year, they kind of came in, gave him another opportunity to be the starter, and next thing you know, he's a healthy scratch last week. So, that whole experiment kind of feels like it has run its course. Like, if you get benched several different times throughout your career in a spot and you're a healthy scratch now at some point as well, it just kind of feels like your time here in Cincinnati has come to a close. Maybe Cam Taylor-Britt needs a fresh start, and there are definitely teams out there that could use him. I could totally see Howie Roseman rolling the dice on CTB in Philadelphia. And candidly, it wouldn't surprise me if he kind of revitalized his career there in Philadelphia to some degree. They're starving for another corner. Quinyon Mitchell, of course, is banged up, and they already had, that second corner spot was already a weakness for Philadelphia when you're talking about guys like Adoree Jackson and Keely Ringo. So Philadelphia is certainly a team to monitor for Cam Taylor-Britt, and, I think you could potentially get back, a draft pick in return, which I think in that situation, it would be better than, I'd feel more comfortable than moving off of Logan Wilson, right? CTB has had his troubles, and if you move off him, you're in a spot where I don't think it hurts you as much. Now, you're going to need depth at that spot, right? What's the likelihood that all DJ Turner and Dax Hill and Josh Newton all get through the rest of the year healthy and not miss any time? That's very unlikely, right? Especially at that type of position like a cornerback. But I think the Bengals are kind of just going in a different direction. I mean, clearly they feel better about a guy like Marco Wilson than a guy like Cam Taylor-Britt. And something, I was thinking about the other day that could be interesting is if they had considered a position switch for Cam Taylor-Britt. The Bengals obviously need help at safety because Geno Stone just simply is not good whatsoever. He flat out stinks. Could they perhaps move him to a safety spot? I don't know if CTB has ever played safety before, but the traits are there for Cam Taylor-Britt. Like, he can run, he's got speed, and he can hit you, right? I mean, it's just kind of the coverage stuff and being at the wrong spot. I can honestly see Cam Taylor-Britt being a solid safety in this league, and I wonder if that's something that Al Golden has, even floated around, or Zach Taylor as a potential possibility for Cincinnati. I kind of would like to see him deployed as that, right? I mean, Geno Stone, it ain't working, and you keep rolling it out each and every week, and it seemingly gets worse every single week. Geno Stone is not the answer. He is not going to be the answer. You have to lick your wounds and understand that move that you made when you signed him in free agency, gave him that 2-year deal, you missed. That's okay. It happens. Sometimes you swing, sometimes you miss, but you can't keep rolling him out there at that spot. We talk about Tyson Anderson, right? Your special teams ace. Clearly, he has not done enough in practice to be given an opportunity to potentially be your starting safety. We saw it last year. We were kind of like, Geno Stone, it ain't working. Are you going to try Tyson Anderson? They didn't even try it once last year. They haven't even tried it once yet this year to this point. So I think that kind of tells you everything you need to know about Tyson Anderson being a potential starter for the Cincinnati Bengals at that safety spot. It just isn't going to happen. But Cam Taylor-Britt could be very, very interesting at that spot. And it can't really get much worse than Geno Stone, right? I mean, you throw him out there, as I mentioned, he's got great speed. He can hit you. He's got the traits. It's just been some of the stuff upstairs about him not necessarily being in the right spot at the right time and just lapses in coverage, right? I think the skills are still there for him to be a quality NFL player, right? This guy was a second-round pick. He's played good football in the past. He just has struggled immensely the past couple of years. And you wonder with Cam Taylor-Britt, there's some, off-the-field stuff. You hear it around town. Oh, you always see Cam Taylor-Britt out enjoying himself on the town. And it can't be happening during the football season, right? So maybe it's a maturity issue that the Bengals are having with him, and that's why he's a healthy scratch. But I think testing him out at safety could be something that I would consider. I'm sure the coaching staff has discussed it. But if not, I'm ready to move him here at this point. See if you can't get that draft pick back that you lost for Joe Flacco. Or, maybe you can get, a player back. Because I think there is some interest out on the open market for Cam Taylor-Britt at the trade deadline. Again, Cincinnati doesn't really make the trades, but they've kind of broken what they've done as an organization here of late, right? With the trade for Joe Flacco, paying Jamar Chase and T. Higgins this offseason, trading for Khalil Herbert at the deadline last year. So this isn't necessarily the same old Bengals. We're seeing some changes how they operate as an organization, a little bit more aggressive, making some decisions they typically don't make, which, by the way, they needed to do this. It's the NFL, and they were operating, it was the archaic stage, right? Because they weren't developing and changing with the times, and they're starting to do that a little bit more. So maybe a trade at the deadline is something that could actually happen for this team. Of the three guys I just mentioned, I think Cam Taylor-Britt would be at the top of that list for me. But I was very surprised that ESPN had it as a 60% chance they trade Logan Wilson. That seems way too high for me. I think that would be a mistake. But, that ultimately is something that obviously could happen. Trey Hendrickson, you got to go 0-2 over the next 2 weeks if you're going to move him. And even then, I'm not convinced Cincinnati would do it. But there is obviously lots of people that would be interested in his services. I expect him to play this week against the Jets. Has the back injury, of course, or the hip injury that cost him last week. But I expect him to be back out there, and the Bengals certainly could use him based on what happened in the game against Pittsburgh last week. Certainly struggled getting to the passer and getting to Aaron Rodgers. All right, good friend of mine and coworker Casey Mallister is standing by here at the show. We've been trying to get Casey on. Casey was on, I don't remember if that was before the Green Bay game or after, but he kind of crashed out a little bit. He was venting. It was very therapeutic to have Casey on and kind of got a lot off his chest. So I want to welcome in Casey Mallister here to today's show. And Case, how do we feel now coming off this Thursday night victory, of course, against the Pittsburgh Steelers? Are you still down in the dumps, or you feel like you got reason to be optimistic here at this point?
Well, first off, I would like to maybe apologize to Joe Flacco.
Yeah.
Um, I was maybe a little too harsh on Joe. That's on me. Quite frankly, all the things that I heard going into that game or going into the Green Bay game were he holds onto the ball, he's immobile, and he takes a lot of unnecessary risks that lead into turnovers, things that I just thought were not a good recipe for the team and how it's built. And then he goes out against Pittsburgh and just does the opposite of all those things. Gets the ball out quickly, mobile in the pocket, making smart, good decisions. He's not trying to force the ball. I mean, it's a pretty simple formula. You target Chase, you target T. And that's what he did. And he did really, really well. And to be quite honest with you, like, he should have done a lot better because they were dropping some of his passes. Like, they're just not used to his ball coming out the way that, it does. It's a lot more streamlined, a harder, faster ball. It's coming down more because he's taller than Joe. All those different factors. So, like, I think, I mean, quite honestly, man, I think that Joe Flacco can get the job done in an aspect where the team can maybe wait long enough for Joe Burrow to come back and sneak into the playoffs. Do I think he's going to lead this team to a positive win record? I don't think so, because the other part of my rant was how bad the team was. And maybe I was wrong on the offensive side. T. Higgins looks great after Pittsburgh. But defensively, it's atrocious. I mean, it is one of the worst that we've ever seen. I know you did a whole segment on this yesterday. This is the worst defense we've seen in the last, generation? Or, like, what would you say, millennia? Something like that, since 2000?
Since 2000,
I mean,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's just, that's unbelievable considering how bad we were last year. And it's a shame that, like, we're starting to get banged up on that in some of those areas too. Like, Trey Hendrickson getting a back injury is not ideal because sometimes those things just kind of linger, and Shamar Stewart, we were hoping to have a lot of production from him. He's out for a while, and I think he's back now in the lineup. But, like, you're just banking on a lot of production from guys that are getting hurt, and guys that we thought that were good, like Cam Taylor-Britt and Logan Wilson, they're starting to get benched for the younger talent on the field, which, those two guys I just listed, Cam and Logan, they're more, their issues are, one is mental for Cam Taylor-Britt, obviously, but he's also really stiff. Like, he's just not good enough fluidity-wise. He's not able to keep up with some of these more shiftier, smaller, faster receivers. I think he does a lot better when it's against a tight end or bigger receiver. Like, I thought he actually matched up pretty well against DK Metcalf, but of course he was a healthy scratch, so I mean, it doesn't matter. But I thought that there would be an opportunity for him to maybe shine in that aspect, but clearly the team does not like where he's at, so I don't know what to make of that. But what I'm getting at is just the defensive side is atrocious, and there doesn't seem to be, like, any light at the end of that tunnel. It just looks like we're going to have to deal with this again this year. And knowing how last year went with Joe Burrow and how many times and opportunities there were to win ball games, but our defense just continually let us down, like, I just don't feel like that's a recipe for a good season moving forward. And so to answer your question, like, I don't feel like I've gained much more faith other than just that this team will be a little bit better on offense, or a lot better, hopefully. But defensively, man, it's bad. Like, I don't, there's not a guy, like, even the one guy that I think is actually decent right now is DJ Turner. And he got a little nicked up last game. Like, he's got injury issues too. So it's just, you're banking on a lot on one guy, And I don't know. I just defensively, it's not a good look for the team moving forward.
So it seems like you've kind of, you're a little bit more optimistic here about what the season could, potentially bring over the course of several weeks. I guess, what are your expectations here for the team now? Because, a couple of weeks ago it was kind of, everything was crashing down. There was no chance that the Bengals would have any life. Now all of a sudden this offense is out there. Joe Flacco, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, they look good over the course of the past 3 halves. You mentioned playoffs as a potential possibility. I guess my direct question to you is, do you think we will see Joe Burrow back and with a chance to potentially lead this team to the playoffs? Is that a realistic possibility in your eyes?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is, right? I mean, mid-December, you're thinking if it's literally mid-December that he returns, December 14th, 15th, 16th. December 14th is that second Ravens game. And that means he would be playing 4 games for you at the back end of this season. And if he, wins 3 out of the 4, right? So we're currently sitting at 3 and 4. If he wins 3 of those 4, we're sitting at 6 wins. That means Joe Flacco only really needs to win 2 or 3 more games to really make you feel like there's an opportunity for Joe to just go out there and like win us the rest of the season, and you sneak into the playoffs. 9-8, I just don't feel like we'll get it done though. Like you need to get to 10 to really make sure that you get in there. And I also think too, like it's important that they win their divisional games. If they can manage to do that, like if they can pull off another win in Pittsburgh, I will feel so much better about where this team is. The next 2 games are very important. It's the Bears and the Jets. Jets first. You got to win against the Jets. I mean, that's simple as that. This team is the worst team in the NFL, in my opinion. Their offense is atrocious. The defense is completely given up. They should be able to move the ball against them, and they should be able to stop whatever they want to try to do. We'll see how Garrett Wilson shakes out, if he's going to end up being healthy or not. But that's the only guy I really am worried about. So the Jets game, I know it kind of feels like a trap game, but you have to win that one. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I don't feel like trap game is even the correct term, because it's like a must-win situation anyways, and this team isn't really that good to be like looking over anyone. So trap game wasn't even the first thing that came to mind when I thought about the Jets game. It's more or less just like you got to handle your business, right? Simple as that. The Bears game, that's going to be a little tough, because I do think that they are a little feisty. I think that offense doesn't really match up well against our defense, just considering Caleb Williams is a very mobile quarterback, can make any throw. So we'll see about that Bears game. But that's not one that's vitally important to the schedule. You have to win your AFC games. That's what really killed us last year, was losing some AFC games early on. Like the Patriots game, you just flip that one game and they are in the playoffs. They edge out the Broncos for that wild card spot, or not the Broncos, but one of the teams. Can't remember off the top of my head, but regardless, they need to win the AFC games, utmost of importance here, and they got to win their divisional games, because I think that's the only way that they can really secure a spot, is either that last wild card spot or winning their division. So that's where I think they're at right now. But again, like the defense has to show a little more life than what it's been showing. I think DJ Turner is the only light at the end of that tunnel, but again, like I don't know, like it doesn't seem like there's any hope moving forward. Like I guess like we're banking on Shamar Stewart to maybe take another step forward in the middle of the season. I don't know. Not very hopeful on that front. You're just going to have to lean on another Joe Flacco, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins sort of games the next couple weeks here to just try to sneak your way in, I guess. You were talking about potential trades on this team, trading away like Cam Taylor-Britt, Trey Hendrickson, Logan Wilson. I want to ask you this question. Is it at all possible that they trade for someone? Because I think like if they are willing to trade for Joe Flacco, which might be the only trade that they make in season here, but if they're willing to do that and to try to compete to give Joe Burrow another chance, is there maybe a thought that runs across their mind like this is a kind of like all in sort of season? And I know we've kind of said that the last couple of years that they're kind of like all in, like this is it. They got to, make their move here to make a Super Bowl. But if it truly is like the last time before we get a complete rebuild on defense, like Trey Hendrickson, is it at all possible in your eyes that they get like, I don't know, a corner or like an edge rusher? Because I look at the list here on like ESPN, and there's some guys that I would have interest in. Like there's Kingsley Ngambare from Green Bay, Braxton Jones from Chicago, Arnold Adebike from Atlanta. Like there's a lot of names here that I would be interested in because I think they come in and like day one, like make an impact on the team. Jermaine Johnson from the Jets. Like I think he can come in. Alontae Taylor from the Saints. He can come in. Jalen Phillips from Miami. He definitely comes in and makes a difference on this roster day one. And I don't think you're trading like absurd draft capital for any of those names that I mentioned. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I think the Bengals, and I was kind of alluding to this a little bit earlier, like they've pivoted off of some of their tendencies of the past here with this organization. I mean, the fact that they gave Jamar Chase and T. Higgins all that money this offseason, that doesn't happen. That's not something that they do. Well, they did that. Trading for a quarterback here when it just kind of, would anybody have been surprised if they just said, oh, we're just going to keep rolling with Jake Browning. It worked a couple of years ago. It'll eventually get a little bit better than what it is right now. No, they made a move. They traded for Joe Flacco. And even back at the deadline last year, trading for Khalil Herbert. How long had it been since they had made an in-season move? I get it's a 7th-round pick. I get he didn't really make you that much better as a football team, but it was some aggression that the front office showed. So I think we now, like we always sit here and talk about, trade rumors or whatever, but I think now like it's more prevalent than ever that this could actually happen for Cincinnati. But back to your point of potentially, giving up more picks to get a good player, I don't necessarily think that is going to happen for Cincinnati. It's a team that they really covet their draft picks. They always have, and I bet it's driving Duke Tobin and company crazy that they don't have that pick that, they did have before the Joe Flacco trade, to be completely honest with you. But I could see a spot where like you move Cam Taylor-Britt and get another cornerback in the process, right? You saw it a couple of weeks ago with the trade, a cornerback for a cornerback, like Cleveland, their slot guy Newsome, he was traded for a corner. Like that could potentially happen. I think corner is still a position of need for Cincinnati. It just kind of feels like the Cam Taylor-Britt situation has run its course. So I don't think they're going to be in a spot where they're like, oh, we'll give up another pick to get this guy. But I think you could potentially be in a corner for a corner move, or a Logan Wilson for a DB type of move. I definitely think moves like that could be possible. But out of the 3 guys that ESPN listed, they had that article that went out this morning. Their top 25 guys that could move: Trey Hendrickson, Logan Wilson, and Cam Taylor-Britt. I was kind of surprised to see that ESPN had a 60% chance that the Bengals trade Logan Wilson and a 25% chance that they trade Cam Taylor-Britt, specifically as it relates to Logan Wilson. I think it would be a mistake to move off him. How do you feel about that particular potential move?
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think that's a mistake. I think you need the leadership in that room. I mean, he wears the C, right? Like he wears the green dot, or did, until he got benched. I don't know if that's changed or not, but yeah, I mean, I'm not moving Logan Wilson off on this team. Not until his contract's finished. Maybe off season you cut him. I don't really care. This season he's a Bengal. Like I'm not moving him. I don't think that's a great idea, especially because like you need depth at linebacker. Like you need depth everywhere, right? Moving him makes me feel a lot worse about our depth, because then you're potentially running out there Shaka Hayward, I guess. Like I don't know, like that. I feel much better if there were an injury to occur for it to be Logan Wilson out there. And yeah, I'm okay. I'll keep Logan Wilson on this team. The Cam Taylor-Britt situation, you mentioned, is there a chance he moves to safety? He played safety at Nebraska his first year or two there, before eventually moving to that wide corner. And the only reason he got moved to the corner spot is because he was capable of doing it. Like, he was more fluid in college. He was a lot younger, able to be able to cover receivers. But he played like in the box. He played like that strong safety type role, like where he could come down and fill in the gaps where there was gap responsibility in the run game. In the NFL, he hasn't proven to be much of a tackler. But like you said, like, he's got the traits of like that size. He's got the straight speed, like the vertical speed, but it's more the lateral stuff, the fluidity that he's been really struggling with as of late. So I think the safety role could prove to be a good spot for him. The comp that I would give for this defense that he could be very vital towards is that Trey Flowers role that that was so vital to this team in 2021 and 2022, where, when the team has a really good tight end and you want to have that kind of like bigger slot corner, or that the safety drop down and be able to cover the corner or cover the tight end, but still kind of get their nose in there in the run game. That's perfect. I think that's perfect for what Cam Taylor-Britt can be. That's not really a second round pick sort of role,
right?
But at this point, like, if you can't move off of him, if you can't trade him, if you can't figure out where he's starting on this team, I think that's a perfect role for him. He might need to bulk up a little bit, but I think his size and his ability to cover bigger guys would prove very vital to this team, because I don't think we have that role as of this moment. I think we kind of, can see that Geno Stone giving up a 70-yard touchdown to Pat Freiermuth is not a great way to get that job done. So, and plus Freiermuth was just killing us all day. The tight ends were killing us all day, and they have been killing us all year. So yeah, I would say that would be maybe a good role for him. And then I don't think they're trading Trey Hendrickson. There's just no way, after they signed a deal with him, regardless of how the season turned out, they were going to keep him on this team for the whole year. They're not in the business of trading away good players. They said it themselves, to making other teams better. So the only way that there's a trade that happens moving forward, I think, is, that, like you said, the Cam Taylor-Britt, maybe for a pick that turns into another player. That could happen. Maybe a multi-team sort of trade where you're trading Cam or Logan to get a pick, and then you swap it for some other player. I think that can happen. It's just a very small likelihood. Like, I think 25% chance, whatever that was for Cam Taylor-Britt, is probably accurate for all the players that were listed for the Bengals. It's a very low likelihood. They want to feel like they won if they trade anyone. They clearly won, and they feel like they clearly won for the Joe Flacco trade currently. And I think that's how they'll ever, like, moving forward. That's the only way that they ever will feel like they will make a trade, is if they feel like they've clearly won. So yeah, that's where the Bengals are at defensively, and coming up with this trade deadline. They got to win the next 2 games. It's simple as that. At least win the Jets game. You got to win the AFC. Yeah, that's where the Bengals are, man.
Yeah, I think that is a really interesting point there, with CTB, because as you mentioned, as I've mentioned, there's traits that are there. There's some speed. There's some physicality, right? This was a high-end draft pick. just cutting bait entirely and not, giving him a chance to maybe play a different position or a different role, I feel like could potentially be a mistake. But then again, we're not in the building, right? There's been some of the maturity questions in the past with him, and maybe, it's just time for the two to, part ways and move on. But to me, that is the biggest name to monitor for Cincinnati as we approach this trade deadline on November 4th. One more question, Case, before we let you go. Prediction. Jets game this week. I would argue the term must win is thrown around all the time. We do it here at the show. Everybody that talks about sports does it. In some ways, this kind of feels more like a must win than last week to me, because if you lose to the winless Jets, it's like, well, all the momentum you established last week just kind of evaporates in thin air. What's your prediction for this week? What do you expect offensively? What do you expect defensively? Right? If you give up 30 plus to a Jets team that doesn't even know who their quarterback's going to be, that is a serious, serious issue. But just your general thoughts going into the game and prediction, if you don't mind, as well.
Yeah, they got to win this game. I'm just looking at how they performed over this season. They've had some close games. They barely lost to the Steelers. They barely lost to the Buccaneers. Barely lost to the Broncos. They only put up 6 points against the Panthers. But man, they've played some tough teams to start this year. They lost to the Dolphins 27-21. That's probably their, the best competitive game, I would say, versus similar talent. Not to the Bengals, but just to themselves. Yeah, if I were to do a score prediction right now, I would say it's probably going to be something like 24-17 Bengals. Bengals pull away with a late score to end the ball game. They don't give enough time for whoever is playing quarterback to go down and score, and continuing the momentum for this team. I think that's, like you said, it is so important that the Bengals continue to let this momentum roll, and they cannot afford to stumble their toe against the worst team in the NFL. A team that doesn't know who their starting quarterback is. So that's my guess for this week. 24-17 Bengals win. Going to say that there's, of course, a Jamar Chase touchdown in there.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe they continue to be able to run the ball a little effectively. I would love to see that. If they are able to run the ball very effectively, it changes the course of this season dramatically, at least on offense. And even a little bit on defense, too. The run game is the best friend of the defense because you can milk the clock and keep the ball on the offensive side. So, yeah, I mean, I think that is very important to be watching in this game. If they win, great. But if they're able to run the ball and win, even better.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. I think, it wouldn't surprise anybody if obviously they lost this game, but I'm going to be optimistic here. I think they'll find a way, but probably a little bit closer than Vegas thinks, in my opinion, and probably a little bit closer than we all want as fans. But Casey Mallister, I appreciate you as always, brother. Let's do it again soon. I know you got the baby at the house, so I appreciate you making some time. Of course, tell baby Sora that we say hello and hope she is doing all good. So that he is Casey Mallister at CBoxCasey on Twitter. Give him a follow. And Case, hopefully we can do this again soon. Appreciate you, brother.
Yep. Appreciate you. See you guys.
All right. See you, Case. That is Casey Mallister. Appreciate him stopping by, talking Cincinnati Bengals here on today's show. That conversation will be out on YouTube later today, and you can find it on our podcast there as well. If you're just joining us, apologies, the graphics not working. I should know how to fix this, and I'm actually going to shoot Casey a text right when we're off here, and he's going to tell me how to fix it again, even though he's already told me how to do this in the past. But it's just me, no baseline crawl there for the graphics today. But we talked trade rumors, and we talked with Casey, and now we're going to transition our conversation a little bit here to some Billy Napier replacements. Another big-time job that is open here at this point is the Florida job. The Penn State job, of course, is open there as well, and now the Florida job is open. There's a couple of names that I do want to touch on here at this point. And number one, of course, would be Lane Kiffin, right? I think, I think the priority for Florida at this point. They should be doing everything in their power to get Lane Kiffin to come to Gainesville and be their next head coach. And it's very interesting at this stage of college football, right? Because you don't know. I think in years past, before the NIL and the portal and the conference realignment, it would be a lock that Lane Kiffin would leave the Ole Miss job for the Florida job. But that's not really the case anymore. There's a lot more parity in college football. You have a lot more opportunities to win at different spots in college football. And you see, guys getting pay raises, schools, paying their coaches because you see these jobs open up and they don't want their coaches to leave, right? They want their coaches to stay. And you certainly saw that at Indiana with Curt Cignetti, right? He recently inked a new deal, a new raise, right, to have him be in Bloomington long term. And we'll see if Ole Miss is able to get something done with Lane Kiffin. But, there was rumblings when the Auburn job came open that Kiffin could perhaps leave and go there. It was well documented. His family wanted him to stay in Oxford, Mississippi, stay the Ole Miss coach. But this is a guy in Lane Kiffin that's a very ambitious guy. Right. And I think at the end of the day, he has to ask himself the question of, do I think I can win a national championship at Ole Miss, or do I need to move to a program like Florida in order to do it? Obviously, there's some more resources at Florida. It's a bigger brand. It's the Gators. It's the Swamp. They've won national titles in the relatively recent past, of course, with Urban Meyer. It's a very proud program. It's a football program that, by the way, hasn't really had much success since Urban Meyer left. I get they've made a couple of conference championships, but nothing crazy, right, for Florida. The standard when you think of Florida football, you think of top of the SEC, competing with Alabama and Georgia, right? The top of college football, competing with other powers like Ohio State and USC and Notre Dame and big brands like that. And the reality of the situation is they haven't been in that kind of spot since Urban Meyer left several years ago, and they've really kind of just been trying to find their way ever since. And so when Lane Kiffin is figuring out what to do here in this spot, he's got to sit there and ask himself, okay, do I think I can win elsewhere, or do I think I need to go elsewhere in order to win a national championship, or am I fine hanging out here in Oxford, Mississippi? I've never been there, but by all accounts, it's a great place to live, right? Hanging out here in Mississippi and trying to build a legacy, right? Because what he's done at Ole Miss, what has he been there, 6 years, something like that, has been tremendous. Obviously hasn't won a national title, but he's won a bunch of games, and he's completely turned that program around. And if he stays there and keeps doing more of the same of what he's doing, and that's winning football games, maybe not winning national championships, but continuing to win football games, he's going to be a legend at Ole Miss in Oxford, right? He's going to have stuff named after him. He might have a statue in front of the stadium, right? He is going to be revered in that town if he stays there and, for the long term. But he's kind of at the prime of his coaching career right now, and he's had a very unique career to this point. Obviously, he comes from a football family. There's the nepotism remarks, right? That only he got these big time jobs early in his career just because his dad or whatever. I don't know, but he was clearly over his skis a little bit. When he was at places like SC and the Raider job in the NFL, and then he was at Tennessee for a year, of course. And he's had a lot of big jobs, and this isn't a guy that's an old guy. But I think now he feels like he's the best coach that he ever has been in his career to this point. He knows how to win. He knows how to establish a culture. He knows how to build a program. Could he transition to Florida and do that? But if you're the Florida Gators, you're their AD, you're kind of blank checking them. You're kind of like, whatever you want, you can have. We want you to be the coach here at Florida, because there isn't another name out there that I really have confidence that could turn this thing around. I think Lane Kiffin could do it, but he clearly has a lot of loyalty and a lot of love and a lot of respect and admiration for what's transpiring at Ole Miss to this point, and ultimately we'll see, if he makes that move. But I think clearly, everybody's talking about it. If him being the top guy, he 100% should be the top guy. He just has to make the decision. Is he worried about, legacy and continuing what he's doing at Ole Miss? Maybe he has confidence that he can win at Ole Miss. And by win, I mean win a national championship, because he's winning right now. I know they lost to Georgia last week, but it's a one-loss team. Their schedule's difficult. It always will be. But if he feels good about recruiting and, having an ability to win a national championship at Ole Miss, I think he'll stay, right? Again, if this was several years ago, before, conference realignment and there was this much parity in college football, he's gone. No question about it. Right? And even thinking back to when Nick Saban left, right? Years prior, people would be going crazy for that job. But like Dan Lanning, he was like, I'm staying put. Sark's like, I'm staying put. I'm good. right? I don't know if that necessarily happens several years ago at this stage of college football. So that's going to be very interesting. Look, Lane Kiffin, he's a little bit different, right? He'll just kind of tell you how it is. He'll say what he feels like. He'll go out on social media. He'll tweet all the time. So he's definitely, a different type of coach, but he knows how to win. And I think he's ready for that kind of a job, like the Florida job. If ultimately he decides that he wants it. But if you're Florida, that's your top guy, and you do everything in your power to try to get him. Very fascinating to see what he'll do. And maybe within a couple of days' time, he'll have a new deal at Ole Miss, and he'll be staying put. Right? I mean, he could have had, there was rumors about him taking the Auburn job. He decided to stay put. Florida's a little bit different than the Auburn job, though. It's a much bigger job. So he's priority number one for me. 2 would be Alex Golesh, of the head coach of South Florida. He's done a tremendous job. He's turned that program around very, very quickly. He's been the OC at Tennessee for Josh Heupel. He was the OC at UCF for Josh Heupel. He's a really bright guy. He actually beat Florida, funnily enough, earlier in the year. I think having the ties, the recruiting ties in the state of Florida is very, very valuable for a guy like Alex Golesh, and he could be looked at as a guy that they have interest in. Now, going outside of the Power Four, I don't know if that's something Florida wants to do here at this point because, of course, Billy Napier was the head coach at Louisiana before he was the coach at Florida. And I think at this point, maybe if you're the Gators, you probably want a guy that's a little bit more established than a guy like Alex Golesh. Again, he's been a great play caller in big places before, but at South Florida, he hasn't had a Power 4 job. There's some risk involved there, and it would feel similar to the Billy Napier hire, which, of course, was a disaster for the Florida Gators. I believe his record was like one game under 500 or like right at 500. Just absolutely ridiculous when you think about the Florida program falling that far. I would consider Alex Golesh. I think he would be a really solid candidate. Again, the recruiting ties, to the state of Florida, and he's been in big-time games. He just beat Florida, clearly knows what he's doing. He turned around the UCF program in a hurry. He's done a tremendous job, and I would consider bringing him in. But you might want to shift in philosophy, right? I don't know how the boosters there in Gainesville and the fan base would be like, well, we tried this with Napier, and you're trying it again with another guy. What are you doing? So I definitely could see that being an issue for them at this point. Candidate number 3 for me is Kenny Dillingham, head coach of Arizona State. Look, Dillingham's not my favorite guy, right? He'll tell you how he feels, right? He's a little bit unorthodox. He gets fired up. He can be a little corny, I think, at times. But, I mean, as far as the head coach goes, I mean, he's 35 years old. And what he did with Arizona last year, taking them to the playoff, this was a guy that was a coordinator at big-time places when he was in his 20s, right? I mean, he was the OC at Oregon there for a little bit. And he's had, lots of experience in these big-time programs. And he's done a tremendous job. And he's a young guy. He's got all types of energy. But his alma mater is Arizona State, so it would take a lot to get him to leave his alma mater. Again, he's 35 years old. He probably thinks he can do great things there at Arizona State, and maybe he can. They're coming off the heels of a huge win, beating Texas Tech, who I was very convinced that Texas Tech was the best team in the Big 12, and Arizona State had no issues with them. Sam Levitt played great in the game, but Dillingham's the guy that I'm calling. If I'm the Florida Gators. He's a young guy. He has that head coaching experience. He's been an OC and a play caller at big-time places. As a young guy, he can recruit. He can connect with the young players. And I think there should be interest there if you're the Florida Gators. But again, alma mater, Arizona State. It's going to take a lot for him to leave. But don't be surprised if he gets a new contract in the coming days. Next up here, Eli Drinkwitz. When people talk about this job, people talk about the Penn State job. We did our replacements video on that. That's up on the channel if you haven't seen that already. But that kind of feels like there's a bunch of different guys that could get that job. People nationally think that this Florida job is going to either be Lane Kiffin or Eli Drinkwitz. And, Eli Drinkwitz, what he's done at Missouri is impressive. He's won a lot of games. Missouri, that was kind of like they're a bottom feeder in the SEC, and they're kind of just there. But, they're a threat, and they played well against Alabama, had an opportunity to win that game. He's won, some bowl games. He beat Ohio State in the bowl game. I get Ohio State, didn't have many guys out there. That wasn't, the Ohio State Buckeyes that we're used to seeing, but it's still, a big-time bowl win for him. He's got kind of, some quirkiness about him as well. All these guys, by the way, do, like Lane Kiffin does. I like it. Like, I like how he handles himself and the confidence that he has. Guys like, Dillingham and Drinkwitz and the other guy that we'll talk about here in a second that was just fired by Penn State. I don't know. Like, it's just kind of, I don't know if that really fits the brand of Florida, but it's a safe hire, right, if you take Drinkwitz, right? He's been in this conference. He's won in this conference. He's a young guy. He can recruit. And, I don't know. Like, can Missouri win a national championship? Probably not. And if you feel like Drinkwitz can come over to Florida and make that kind of adjustment, you definitely would consider hiring a guy like Eli Drinkwitz. I'm not as high on him as everyone else. A lot of people nationally, again, are like, if you can't get Kiffin, you get Drinkwitz and you move on. I'm not exactly sure I would take him. I might even lean towards Golish a little bit over Drinkwitz, despite the fact he's not a Power 4 head coach here at this point. But Drinkwitz is certainly a hot name to monitor there as well. And then James Franklin. I don't think Florida should do this, but they're probably going to call and probably have a conversation with James Franklin here at this point. Franklin, of course, just let go of his duties at Penn State. He made it very clear that he doesn't want to sit around here. He is ready to get back into coaching right here, right now, and he probably wants the Florida job more than anything, because I think in a lot of ways that's kind of an upgrade from the Penn State job, right? I mean, just kind of, I don't know if people necessarily would agree with that now, just with the state of college football. The Penn State job, by the way, is a great job, but it's the Gators, right? And you have an opportunity to rebuild this program. Again, so many people have tried, Will Muschamp and Mullen and Jim McElwain and Billy Napier. Those guys have all tried, and they've all failed. And there's a lot of resources there at Florida. The facilities there are incredible. If you have a good team, the Swamp's going to show out. That's one of the best home field advantages in college football, if you have a solid team and that place is packed. So, if James Franklin could get fired from Penn State and then get the Florida job, that would be pretty miraculous if he was able to pull that off. But I think he's a guy that kind of a dark horse candidate there that people are going to consider. So that's kind of my, top list of, guys that I think they're going to go after. Me personally, I would go with Lane. I would do everything you can to get Lane Kiffin. And then if you can't get him, there's some other names that I mentioned with the Penn State job, like Clark Lee, Brent Key. Those are guys that I would have interest in there as well if I'm the Florida Gators. But I think the list that I just gave are probably going to be their top targets. And there's two other names that I do want to mention here on the show before we move into our college football top 10 here. And look, I'm not saying they're realistic, and I'm not saying they're going to happen, or I think they're going to happen, or they even should happen. You need to call Urban Meyer, right? Look, he said he's done, but what? He said he was going to leave Florida and retire, and then he came back to Florida and kept going, and then he went to Ohio State, right? And then when he was done at Ohio State, he said he was good, and then he took the Jaguar job. So this is a guy that sometimes changes his mind, okay? That is, very much the case. Florida needs Urban Meyer. They need him very badly, and I think he would get them back to prominence. Now, of course, the last time we saw Urban Meyer in the national eye as a coach, it was a complete disaster. I mean, with the Jaguars, that might be the worst coaching job in the history of the NFL, what Urban Meyer did in Jacksonville. He's not a pro coach. We know that. And he tried to run it like a college program, and you're dealing with grown guys making millions of dollars. Can't have that. Now, I don't know how Urban Meyer would do in NIL. To be completely honest with you. This is one of the best college coaches of all time. Like Nick Saban obviously has separated himself from the group, but like Urban Meyer belongs in that next tier. He's the real deal. 3 national titles. All he does is win. And I think part of the reason he struggled so much in Jacksonville, obviously there was the mistreatment of the players and the incident of him at the bar, having his issues like he has in the past, right? Those things have been very true. But it was the fact that he couldn't handle the losing. Right, when he was at Utah, he lost like 2 games, didn't lose many games at Florida, and lost less than 10 games at Ohio State, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So the fact that they were losing basically every week, it was literally driving him crazy. Like, he didn't know how to handle it. He did not know what to do, and he completely just fell apart. And if he goes to Florida, I would think he would turn it around, but they would still lose some games, and I don't know how he would handle that, to be completely honest with you. But, look, I don't know if it's the best decision. Like, I would definitely take Lane Kiffin over Urban Meyer, right? But you should call, right? Say, hey, Coach, how you doing? I know you said you were done in coaching. We need you. A lot of good memories here. It's a little bit different. You can build on this legacy here. Your career ended poorly, right, at the professional level with the Jaguars. Do you want to come back and potentially coach? Again, I don't know how he could handle NIL. Obviously, that's not something he had to deal with. But Urban Meyer, he's a flat-out incredible college coach. I'd make the call. Right? Again, I'm not predicting this would happen, but I'd make the call. And the last name, again, just kind of floating it out there is a crazy one. John Gruden wants to coach, right? He's made that very, very clear. And I don't know if there is an NFL team that is going to give him an opportunity. I don't. So now what he's doing at in the media is tremendous. He's unbelievable at that. And if he wants to keep doing that, I kind of hope he keeps doing that because it's just great to see what he's doing with the media. But I don't know if he's going to get another head coaching job in the NFL. I think he might have to go to college if he wants the job. Now, I doubt Florida would bring him in, right? I mean, that'd be wild to do that if you're the Gators. You're looking for some stability here. You're looking to be taken really, really seriously. And with Gruden, I think it's one of two things. I think it's either great or it's awful. I don't know if there's much middle ground there. I'm not even suggesting you call him, but it's a name that's been floated around. And it's interesting. Now, the Arkansas job with Gruden, I think, might actually have some more, be a little bit more realistic. I think that could actually happen, him going to Arkansas, because he clearly wants to coach. He's made that very clear. And again, I don't know if he's going to be able to do that at the professional level. So those are the names there. I'm doing everything in my power to get Lane Kiffin if I'm the Gators, and most people that talk about college football agree. Drinkwitz, certainly a guy to monitor. Kenny Dillingham, would he leave his alma mater? Alex Golish, great candidate, but do you want to go, the non-power 4 route again? James Franklin, kind of a dark horse. What an incredible bounce back that would be for him if he got the Florida job. But those are just some names to monitor here at this point. Before we get out of here on today's show, want to do our college football top 10. We do it every Wednesday here at the show. And I go through the top 10 names. We kind of compare where I had them last week, where the AP poll has them, and kind of just break them down a little bit. And that's how we'll close out our show. Here on a Wednesday, the two teams on the outside looking in are like kind of that 11-12 range. I have Miami, right? I have them falling all the way outside the top 10. I had them at 3 last week. They lose Friday at home against Louisville. Solid Louisville team. Only one loss. Carson Beck looked horrid. Threw 4 picks. Could have been about 6 or 7 picks, to be completely honest with you. Cristobal, it's not a game you can lose at home. I get it's kind of a weird week. It's Friday, but it's a lot of eyeballs on you. At that point, you failed, right? I don't think anybody is surprised that Miami lost a type of game like this. This is something that Miami does, right? In recent years, it's kind of a game they would lose. And a lot of us thought that it was going to be different this year because the offensive line was better. The defense was better. The quarterback at the time, going into the game, was being really careful with the football and protecting it. And that all kind of blew up in their face. They have an opportunity to right the ship here and get to the playoff. Their schedule's weak. Nobody really should test them the rest of the way so, they can win out and get in the playoff. But, I think, we all were like, Miami's for real. They're back. No, they're not, as they lose that game at home to Louisville. They're on the outside looking in. BYU also on the outside looking in. They're undefeated here at this point. I think they're Texas Tech lost to Arizona State, so, you might think that they're not the best team in the Big 12 anymore. I still think they are, to be honest with you, despite the loss. They're not as good as I thought, but I still think Texas Tech's the best team. But BYU, they're undefeated. They beat Utah. That's a big-time win for them on the road, and the UC Bearcats going to have to deal with them in a few weeks. So BYU, they look like a playoff team here at this point. I don't expect them to make any noise. True freshman quarterback, Bear Mockmeyer, doing some good things there at that position for them. So I've got them just barely on the outside looking in. If they continue to win, they're going to have to be in the top 10 at some point, but I'm not fully sold yet. At number 10, I have Ole Miss. Last week I had them 9. The AP poll has them 8. The AP poll was really high on them going into the Georgia game, had them all the way up at 5. We said here that's too much, right? Georgia's going to win this game. I didn't think it would be as close as it was, to be honest with you, but Ole Miss is still a good team. Yeah, there's no shame losing to Kirby Smart in Georgia, right? Everybody loses to Kirby Smart in Georgia besides Alabama. So I think they'll be all right. I think they'll be a playoff team. But as we just mentioned in our previous segment, there could be some distractions here as we move forward with Lane Kiffin. And, is he kind of taking a peek at that Florida job? How committed is he to the program? There's still talent there. They still got a solid defense, which they got lit up against Georgia and Gunnar Stockton, which is a little bit concerning there for me because the defense for Ole Miss kind of was one of the things that kind of solidified them as a top 10 team in my eyes, and they struggled there. So their schedule gets difficult. This Oklahoma game they got coming up, it's a feisty Oklahoma bunch that needs a victory after getting smacked in Red River, and that's going to be a great college football game. But I still have belief. I figured Ole Miss was going to lose that Georgia game, but I actually leave that game with a little bit more faith in Ole Miss than I did coming into the football game. At number 9, I have Georgia Tech. Last week, they were outside my top 10. The AP poll has them all the way up at that 7 spot. You got to give them credit. Brent Key, what he's doing as head coach, tremendous. Haynes King is just a dog at that quarterback position. Around him, I don't think they have enough dudes. Like if they played, one of these top 5 teams, like an Oregon or, a Georgia or an A&M or certainly an Indiana, Alabama, Ohio State, I don't know if they could hang, but they deserve a lot of credit for what they've been doing to this point. Clemson, they beat them. Clemson's not a very good football team. We thought they were going to be a national title contender. They are not. But that Duke team's solid, and the Duke team was favored in the game. And, that game really wasn't very competitive as Georgia Tech really took it to them from start to finish. So I don't anticipate them making some kind of run in the college football playoff, but you got to give them credit where credit is due. Got them at that number 9 spot. Brent Key, that Penn State job's open. That Florida job's open. Shoot, the LSU job could perhaps become open. The Arkansas job is open. So we'll see if Brent Key perhaps is on the move. At number 8, I got Notre Dame. The AP poll has them at 12, and I didn't have them in the top 10 last week. They have 2 losses. I understand that, but Notre Dame's one of the best teams in the country, in my opinion. Some struggles on defense, obviously, but I think Marcus Freeman has done a better job of that in recent weeks. They beat USC by 10. Didn't even really feel like it was that close. That's a Notre Dame offense. It's really, really good. One of the best running attacks in America. Definitely have the 2 best, the best backfield in America with Price and Jeremiah Love. CJ Carr's playing at a high level. Look, they just had 2 difficult games out to shoot, A&M and Miami. Right now, Miami's not as good as maybe we thought, and maybe A&M's not either. But they're 2, solid teams with a new quarterback. You're going in on the heels of going to the national championship. It's tough, and I think Notre Dame, they're going to run the table. I think, and they're going to be a playoff team. I am much higher on Notre Dame than the AP poll is. I got them all the way up at 8. 7, Vandy. Last week I had them outside the top 10, and the AP poll has them at 10. This isn't Vanderbilt last year. Right? It's not. I understand, Pavia's back. It's Clarkley, whatever. It's a real football team. And they were hanging right with Alabama, and they probably would have beat them if they didn't have the 2 red zone turnovers. Diego Pavia at the next level, he's not an NFL quarterback, but he's a really, really good college football quarterback. Is he maybe a little bit too old to be playing college football? You can make that argument, but he's a dog, right? And his team fully supports him and believes in him and rallies around him, and he's done a tremendous job to this point. LSU is not nearly as good as we thought. They're fraudulent. Brian Kelly, as I mentioned, might lose his job, but they dominated that game. Right, and they won that game. It was a big win for them, and now they have another opportunity here against Missouri. I might be a little bit too high on Vandy, but if they take care of Missouri at home with incredible atmosphere, game day going to be there this weekend, Missouri's really for real. But this is a team that they're hanging in there in the SEC, and I'm not going to be surprised at all if they make the playoff. Obviously, they can probably only lose one more game if they want to get in. But Vandy's a real team now, and I got them at 7. It's not like last year it was, they beat Alabama, but that Alabama team, they weren't good. I get they were number 1 in the country at the time, but that team was horrible. The quarterback was horrible. It was a new, staff. The defense was horrible. That wasn't like, some crazy win. It's not like going to Columbus and beating Ohio State this year, right? So, but it was kind of a cute story last year, whatever. It's a real team. There's a real team, and they can do damage. Got Vandy at 7. A&M at 6. Look, I've been high on A&M all year. Last week I had them at 4. The AP poll has them at 3 right now. They won last week, but I got questions there with that defense. Petrino, the interim guy at Arkansas, he knows offensive football, so it shouldn't be so much of a shock that Arkansas has looked pretty competent, or pretty good, really, on offense the past couple of weeks. But, you can't be giving up that many points to Arkansas, I don't think so. I got some questions there with the defense of Mike Elko. Talk about, he's not going anywhere, but we talk about those head coaching openings. You should be calling about Elko, and you should be seeing a Mike Elko extension or a Mike Elko raise at any point, I think, for A&M. But I'm a little bit, taking a step back a little bit from A&M. They're still really good. They can prove it with their schedule the rest of the way. Marcel Reed was tremendous in the game. That defense concerned me a little bit. So despite the win, I have them dropping from 4 to 6 in my rankings. Georgia, got them at 5. It's Kirby. It's Georgia. It looks a little bit different this year. The defense doesn't look like a Georgia defense. But if you get Gunnar Stockton and Zachariah Branch and that run game going, that tight end is incredible as well. Lawson Lucky is unbelievable. And, look, Georgia's the real deal. They can win the national title. It looks different, as I just mentioned, than Georgia teams and Kirby Smart teams of the past. Last week I had them at 7. The AP poll has them right here at 5. I've got them at 5. To go out there and hang 40-plus on Ole Miss in a game where your defense wasn't getting any stops and just kind of beat them in a shootout and beat them 17-0, I think, in the fourth quarter. So you got stops when you needed to. Says a lot about Kirby and that team. Kirby's the best coach in the country, and that's going to give them some wins the rest of the way. Georgia, they lost to Bama. they've got an Alabama problem, but basically everybody else in the country has an Alabama problem too. Georgia's the real deal. I got them at 5. Oregon, I had them at 8 last week, but since that Indiana loss, Dan Lanning is ticked off, and he's got his team playing ticked off. I get they played Rutgers, bottom feeder in the Big Ten. I understand that, but they beat the crud out of them, and they're getting committed to run the football again. He doesn't want to be some, finesse team. Like, he is trying to be physical and punch you in the mouth, win at the line of scrimmage, run the football, and they've done that over the course of the past few weeks. Oregon, it was a slip-up against Indiana, but Indiana's a top team in the country, right? So I don't think you can bang on Oregon necessarily too much for that, but they're playing with some anger, some rage. They're ticked off, and they're very much a threat to win the national title here at this point. Last week I had them at 8 all the way up to 4. AP has them at 6. Indiana, have them at number 3. Last week I had them at number 2, and the AP poll has them at number 2. They beat Michigan State, got off to a slow start in the game. I like Michigan State to cover in that game. They did. I am fascinated, by the way. I am so excited for this game at noon, UCLA and Indiana. Signetti said it himself in the press conference. He goes, this UCLA team, they're an undefeated team. Right, they're a 3-0 football team because it's a complete regime switch for UCLA after they lost. They went 0-4 to start, and they're losing to crappy teams. And all of a sudden, they're winning games in conference. Like, they have been a great story, a great turnaround. It's been fascinating to watch that. Iam Aliava is like, that looks like the guy that we expected him to look like, and how he looked at parts throughout Tennessee last year. But I'm excited for that game. I'm not going to sit here and say UCLA is going to pull an upset. They got to go to Bloomington. It's a big spread, but I'm really fascinated by that game, and we'll see how Indiana looks in that game. But dropping them has nothing to do with them. I still think the world of Indiana, and they are still for real, but dropping them has to do with Kalen DeBoer and the Alabama Crimson Tide. I mean, I've said it multiple times on the show. I can't say it enough. The turnaround that we've seen from this team is unbelievable. What happened that first week, they looked completely non-competitive in the game. They looked soft. They looked like there was no culture established. The effort wasn't there. Like, they did nothing right in that football game. And all they've done since then is do things right. And Kalen DeBoer deserves a ton of credit for that. The gauntlet in which he has navigated over the course of the past few weeks, insane. Absolutely insane. Just ranked opponents, Georgia, Vanderbilt, Missouri, Tennessee, beating them all. Now they got to go on the road against the South Carolina team. This could be a letdown week, right, for Alabama. Coming into the year, Carolina was supposed to, be a threat in the SEC. They're kind of a dumpster fire here at this point. But, Sellers, that's the type of quarterback that has given Alabama issues in the past. We'll see. I think the spread is only like 13 points, so Vegas knows that there's an opportunity here for Carolina at home, so they can't afford a letdown game. But the way he's moving, Kalen DeBoer, talking about Ryan Day moving different. Kalen DeBoer's moving different too. He's got a chip on his shoulder. He's coaching with some rage, some anger. Like, you're seeing that out of Oregon and out of Alabama here at this point, because they both have a loss. They're both ticked off and trying to be more violent, be more physical at the line of scrimmage, and they've done a tremendous job of that. To this point, but I got Alabama at the number 2 spot. Had them at 5 last week. AP poll has them at 4. Could be a potential letdown game against Carolina, but they after that bounce back from Florida State, they deserve that number 2 spot. And we talk about kind of the tiers, how Ohio State has separated themselves from the rest of the country, and they have. Alabama is that next best thing where you go, they can give Ohio State the best shot, right? I think Oregon could give them a shot, and maybe Indiana could give them a shot there as well, in Georgia. But I think Alabama can give them the best shot here at this point. But still plenty more work to do for the Crimson Tide and Kalen DeBoer. At 1, Ohio State. They've been there all year. Last week I had them at 1. The AP poll has them at 1. I mean, shutting out Wisconsin. Wisconsin doesn't score, so, take it with a grain of salt, right? Iowa shut them out, I believe. So, that's a bad team in Wisconsin. We might be talking about Luke Fickell replacements sooner rather than later here on this show. But that defense is crazy. And I think, some of the Bama defenses and, certainly, that 09 defense, of course, was real. The 14 or the 15 defense for Bama was real. The 21 Georgia defenses are some of the best teams, the best defenses that we've seen in my lifetime. It might be a little bit early to put Ohio State in the company of them, but if they run the table here and then go on another run in the playoffs, I mean, you got to put them up there along with those defenses as well. They are unbelievable. They can apply pressure on the line of scrimmage. It's difficult to run against Ohio State. They cover. Their linebackers are so good. They're fast. They're great in coverage. Their safeties are incredible. They got players that are versatile, like Caleb Downs. You can line them up wherever you want. Same really with Arvell Reese. You got guys that are just chess pieces that Matt Patricia can put in different spots. And obviously he's calling the shots. Their DC, who's won, 3 Super Bowls. So what they're doing defensively is incredible. Saying they finally opened it up because they were struggling to run the ball against Wisconsin, which, by the way, if there's one thing Wisconsin has done decently this year, it's stopped the run. Bama had issues running on them early in the year as well. And they were like, oh, we can't run the ball. Julian, see what you got. And, if you got any wagers on him to win the Heisman, there's a cash out now is all I'll say as it relates to that. But Saying played unbelievable. He's going to continue to play unbelievable, and we'll see if anybody can knock them off. But Ohio State has separated themselves from the pack here at this point. So once again, on the outside looking in, just barely Miami and BYU, 10 Ole Miss, 9 Georgia Tech, 8 Notre Dame, higher on them than many other people in the country, 7 Vandy, kind of higher on them than many other people in the country as well, 6 A&M, 5 Georgia, 4 Oregon, 3 Indiana, 2 Bama, and 1 the Ohio State Buckeyes. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us here at the show. Went a little bit longer today. We had our Bengals trade rumors. ESPN had a piece. That was our first segment. You'll find that video out on YouTube here sooner rather than later, talking about potentially trading Trey Hendrickson, Cam Taylor-Britt, and Logan Wilson. They said there's a 60% chance the Bengals trade Logan Wilson, which is pretty noteworthy to me. Had Casey Mallister on. That was great. He, of course, broke down his kind of thoughts on the Bengals and turning the page here to this Jets week with this team here at this point. We did our Billy Napier replacements. That will go up later today on the show as well. And, of course, our college football top 10. All those will be going out later today on YouTube. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us throughout the duration of the show. We will be back tomorrow at 10 o'clock, so no off the bench the rest of the week. We'll do my show at 10, and we'll go a little bit later. Like today was like an hour, 15 minutes. We'll probably do that throughout the remainder of the week, and then Reed Mouse will be back tomorrow, next week, on Off the Bench. No graphics today. Again, I'm solo producing this thing, and I should know how to figure that out. I'm going to be looking at my phone here in a second, and Casey Mallister is going to explain that to me, so appreciate you sticking through with just me on the screen and no graphics, but appreciate everybody hanging out. Those videos will be up on YouTube later today. The podcast will be up, of course, wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, iHeart, you name it. Give me a follow at StoneShields_ on Twitter. Give the show a follow there as well at the Stone Shields. Appreciate everyone as always, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. But until then, take care, everybody.